everybody, welcome to Bone2Pick. I am Michael Davis and we are coming to you today from beautiful sunny Los Angeles, California. And I am absolutely thrilled to be interviewing the great, iconic Mr. Bill Watrous this afternoon. Bill is simply stated probably one of the greatest trombone players in the history of the instrument. He is a true virtuoso in every sense of the word. He has recorded over 25 CDs as a solo artist. He's won a myriad of awards, including Downbeat Readers Poll, Downbeat Critics Poll. He is literally on hundreds and hundreds of recordings of other artists. A couple that really jump out to me. A great solo he played on a Claire Fisher record that I've always really loved, and great work with Milton Nascimento. Just a ton of incredible work throughout the years. He's been a dominant force on the New York scene, and then in the early 70s became a dominant force out here in Los Angeles, California. And just before we kick off the interview, I wanted to say my own little personal story. I knew about Bill, of course, when I was starting the trombone, and I got my driver's license in San Jose, California, and first records that I went and bought, that I drove myself to the record store back when there were record stores, was Bill Watrous, Manhattan Wildlife Refuge, and Maynard Ferguson Chameleon. I took them home, and of course I put Bill's on first because I was a trombone player, a budding trombone player. And I remember getting to his fourth floor walk-up cadenza and my jaw just dropped. And 40 years later, it still drops when I hear it. It's one of the most amazing cadenzas you've ever heard. For you young folks out there, if you're not familiar with it, go to YouTube and check it out. It will blow your mind, and it still does, even all these years later. So first of all, Bill, thank you so much for taking time
Thanks
to
for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. It's what a wonderful opportunity here. We look forward to talking about your extraordinary career and your life in music. Maybe we can start kind of at the beginning. You grew up in Connecticut, and I know your father was also a trombone player.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk about some of those, just those early times in your life and what drew you to the trombone. I'm assuming your dad had probably a lot to do with that.
Oh, yeah. My dad had, I would say, about 4 or 5 trombones around the house. The best one he had was a Super Olds. That was the one he played regularly. And he had a couple of others. He had an Old King, and then a Busher, and I think a Reynolds. Mm-hmm. I don't remember, but they were all around, and I would get back from school, first grade, and I would get into all of the horns, except for the Olds. He kept that, and I would mix them all up, and get the slides in the wrong place, and get peanut butter and Bosco all over everything, For those of you who don't know what Bosco is, you know what Comet Cleanser is, right?
Right.
Well, they were just terrible, And he'd come and find it. And oddly enough, he would not give me attitude about that. Mm. It's the Olds that he was guarding. He had the Super Olds. Was a really nice horn for the time,
Mm-hmm.
But that's what got me involved in playing the trombone. And I never took a lesson. I just picked horns up and started playing them. I used to listen to him practice around the house, and I would hear the pretty sound he got and the phrasing and things he did. And he had a piano player that he knew named Wilda Mahoney, which I didn't know was actually his mistress. My mother knew, but I didn't. And he used to bring her a little electric piano, a terrible little instrument, one of the early ones. And they would play around the house, And I used to lay there and just listen to this and think, gee, that sounds good. And every Christmas, he would play over on the Connecticut State Farm for Women. This was a women's prison that was over, and he was the laundry manager over there. Mm-hmm. And every Christmas, he would go up and play Oh Holy Night and one of the Ave Marias. And I would look at some of these hard-nosed prisoners there who would stand there and cry. And I was just a little kid. I says, what the devil are they crying about? I don't understand, because when you're that age, you don't know, you don't get it.
Right.
So that's what I remember all about that. And I just do remember playing the horn. He finally broke down and got me a trombone. It was a Henry Diston, D-I-S-T-E-N.
Wow.
They don't even make trombones. They made silverware. And during the Second World War, brass was on short supply. They used it for other things, And this was heavy. It had all kinds of writing all over the bill. Mother, our country, love it or leave it. And it weighed about 24 pounds. Just heavy. And the slide was pathetic. I still had it when I went to my first year in high school, and whoever had the horn before used jeweler's rouge to clean the slide, and used to go, and the other trombone players in the band would go, "Hey, Watrous, grind me a pound," you know, and that went over great, you know. So.
Well, it's amazing that you're one of the smoothest players of all time. It's amazing that's what you started on, that you had to endure that to get to pass it.
Yeah, but I finally inherited his super olds. He got an Olds Ambassador. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm, sure.
Terrible horn. I mean, really, and he bought a new Olds Ambassador and loved it and gave me the super. And
Wow.
I was thoroughly impressed with that, you know, and I mean, I loved the way it played. And I kept playing it. I played it all the way through until the time I was in New York when I first got there, and I took it out on the road with Kai Winding, you know. And finally, they bullied me into playing a King 3B, which they were all playing. So Winding gave me one of his King 3Bs, and I played that for a while, but I found out that the overtone series in the first position, high B flat on up, was all flat. And so no matter how far in I put the tuning slide, it was still flat. So what I wound up doing is learning all of my alternate positions playing this thing. And I played it out on the road for years with him. And what a character. Winding was one of the greats of all time.
Yeah.
Later on, I'll tell you some stories about him.
Okay. Well, you know, that's a perfect segue into maybe talking about the beginning of your career really started taking off in the 60s, and you were doing all kinds of stuff working with Maynard Ferguson and your time with Woody Herman, Quincy Jones, and Kai Winding. Maybe you could just talk about that time in your life and maybe some of the memories that you have of those professional experiences.
They were fascinating. You know, the Kai Winding band, the 4 trombones, that was interesting, you know, to go, because everything that we played was a 4 trombone arrangement of big band charts. So we played everything, you know. I didn't realize how hard they were until about 10 years ago when we did a reunion. And I started playing. I said, my God, did we actually play these things? Yeah, really did, you know.
Who were the other members in Kay's band at that time?
Peter Vavona.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Where is he now?
He's teaching down in Arizona, in I think northern Arizona.
If you have a phone number on him, I'd love to have that.
I'll track that down.
Because I need to call him.
Okay.
Sometime. He was a great trombone player. I loved him very much. And then Peter Phillips was the bass trombone player.
Oh, okay.
And then there was me and Kay. And I got some hysterical memories from traveling with that band.
I bet. That's good.
Amazing.
How'd you find your time with Woody? Did you enjoy the time?
I loved
on that
Woody.
mini?
I loved him very much. That was one of the last road gigs that I took. And while I was out on there, now let me preface this a little bit. Before I had actually done that gig while I was out there, I sat in my hotel room, and I was kind of like a party guy. I was drinking then and having a good time, like everybody did at that time, getting nowhere. And I was in one of these moods. I was actually sitting in a hotel room, and I was in tears. I said, "Dear Lord," I says, "I'm doing something wrong. Whatever it is that I'm doing wrong, I'll stop doing it." I said, "But can you give me some kind of sign as to what my life is, what direction my life is going? As this is not happening." 3 days later, I get a call to do the Merv Griffin show. Bob Brookmeyer is leaving, so I took his chair. I mean, I didn't take his job, I took his chair, because he was so wonderful, And I said, "Thank you very much." And it was my last drink.
Wow.
My last drink.
Interesting.
I said, "Okay, I get it.
Wow.
I'm going to be a good boy now." I wasn't a good boy in other areas, but I was a good boy there.
Well, that's a pretty important one. I mean, good for you that you made that shift. Well, you brought up the Merv Griffin show. That was actually the next question I wanted to ask you about. And So you were there from 1965 to 1968, something like that?
Yeah. Right.
And how was that then? So that was kind of like your first main TV gig, steady
I would say,
gig in town?
Danny Stiles was the first trumpet player on there, and Bill Berry was the other trumpet player. I was the only trombone. So what I wound up doing is taking other parts and adding, playing a saxophone part that wasn't played and adding that to what the brass. And I would come up with parts and things, that would work to add to that ensemble, And Merv, God bless him, man, never really did any research on people going on the show. He would just go on, they'd come on, and he would wing it, And of course, people that really had something upstairs would really, turn him over. Merv didn't really have it all, straight. No, later on, Dick Cavett was different.
Mm-hmm.
That came later. That show came later, and that was a great band. Unlike the Griffin band, which was Mort Lindsay was the conductor and the piano player. I did something to him one time. We had a pipe that ran across us, over top of the piano, and I used to sit and squirt this pipe. No, I'd squirt the piano when he wasn't there, and there were water all over, and Merv was looking at this and looking up at this pipe, And one day, when I came into rehearsal, Merv is yelling at the guy who does all of that work. There's a leak coming out of this pipe, and I want you to open that up and find. And the guy said, "Hey, there's not been any water through there in 15 years. How can you say?" He said, "Just the same, it's dripping on my piano, and I want you to do it." So the guy gets his ladder, and he climbs up and he forces this thing open, and a couple of drops of water come down on the piano. And Merv said, "See?" And I went, "Oh, thank you again, Lord." So, well, I didn't do that anymore. It was a hard show to do because there was really all kinds of silly stuff going. Oh, one night I was on camera. We were all on camera, and I was a pipe smoker in those days. Okay. I had this I was smoking this pipe up there, and I had this big jar for trash, and I'm dumping the cleaning the pipe off, and all of a sudden, I'm smelling smoke, and I'm looking down, and I had set stuff in this thing on fire, and it's starting to blaze up. So now, and the audience is starting to pick up on it,
Oh, this is right during the show?
Right during the show. So I
boy.
take my book, and I put it over top of it to shut it down.
Uh-huh.
All that happened is tons of smoke came up from there all over the place, and the audience started absolutely freaking out. There's smoke all and Merv's going, without looking, "Is that Watrous over there doing this?" And they all ratted on me right there. So, oh, God, okay. So they stopped the show, came over and dragged this thing away, put water on it and all, And Merv never let me up. He was on me all the time. It was just, friendly like,
Uh-huh.
But just remember some of the guests he had, were just, I don't know why he chose them to even show up on national TV, but they did,
He was an interesting guy too, right? In terms of he had a knack for making money in projects and everything. I read a few things about him. In addition to being a talk show host, he had all kinds of production companies and issues
and TV shows, little game shows and things like that.
Right.
And I remember buying that Mercedes I was telling you about, this 71 280 SEL. Now I had it, and I'm now driving it over and parking it in back, next to his coupe that he had. And Merv says, "Watrous, I saw your sedan out there, your Mercedes sedan. Nice. You'll notice it isn't as expensive a car as mine." I thought, well, okay, that's par for the course.
Yeah. Hey, you're a trombone player and you got a Mercedes. Game over.
Hey.
You would. Can we shift gears a little bit and talk about
Sure.
your time? This is more in the rock and roll vein, but you were a part of a very famous rock band called 10 Wheel Drive.
Oh, gee.
And for those of you who don't know, 10 Wheel Drive was a horn. Would you say horn-dominated band? Right? The horns were very prevalent,
say,
and
yeah.
featured a singer named
Genya Ravan.
Genya Ravan, who I understand was compared a lot to Janis Joplin,
Well,
coming
she
in
thought,
that kind of...
we used to call her the white Janis Joplin. You know.
But what's interesting about the band is when you look at the list of players, the alumni from the band, it's an amazing group of musicians, from Don Grolnick on piano to Danny Stiles, Dave Liebman, Tom Malone, of course yourself. Can you talk a little bit about that experience playing in that band at that point in your career?
It was the first hardcore rock that I had played. That's really what I thought it was at the time. You know, they had a tune called "The Eye of the Needle," which was sort of a hit for them, semi-hit. And we played at the Fillmore East one time, and the sound man had it all set up so that while we were playing, the sound would go like this, from side to side. And people were going, because they were all ripped out on something. And we finished a set in there, and this kid came up to the bandstand, and he looks over the music and says, "Wow, you guys have got music you're reading. You're super professionals." You know.
That's awesome. Well, here's the question that I've been dying to ask you, and wanted to just hear as many memories and thoughts as you have about this. But in the mid-'70s, you recorded two extremely important and seminal records for Columbia Records. The first one being Manhattan Wildlife Refuge, and then the second one, The Tiger of San Pedro. As I'm sure you know, in addition to myself, those records had a huge impact on so many trombone players.
Do you know there were two records that went before that?
Oh, really?
That nobody knows anything about.
Really? I did not know that. Yeah.
There was one, In Love Again, which is nothing but a string section. Dick Berkey wrote all the charts on that.
Okay.
And I did da 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 da, and all those really syrupy ballads. I mean, it was really well written. Berkey just wrote tremendous stuff on there, right? So that went down. And then there was another one after that, Love Themes for the Underground, the Establishment, and Other Subcultures Not Yet Known. Honest to God. I have that.
Rolls
too.
right off the tongue.
Well, that was done for this.
That's great.
And that came out in Walter Rame. I don't know if he's still in New York or not.
Yeah, I don't know that name.
A composer that he actually talked me into having him do that, because I was doing some jingles and some record dates and things for him in New York. And I said, okay. So he did this and did it. It was like voices, vibes, drums, bass, and all kinds of other things. I remember that because Marilyn Jackson, who was a friend of mine at the time, when I knew in New York, was the head of the singers on this date. And the writing for the singers was so absolutely ridiculous that she wound up in there readjusting all of that so it worked. I have a copy of this.
Wow.
You know, you can't get these anywhere.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, then, so following that, maybe talk about how your deal with Columbia came about, and then I know John Hammond, a very famous producer, produced those records, and also just putting the big band together at that time, just how that came about and what that was like. I'll tell you,
Willard Alexander was a major part of this thing. Willard had known me for a long time and had come to clubs I was playing with rhythm sections, and he heard the band. And he said, look, he says, I'm going to try to get you on Columbia Records. You know, and I said, really? How interesting, you know. So sure enough, he worked it out with John Hammond, where John came and heard the band, and John decided to record the band. So I figured, now let's see, I got to make this sound like it's not a jazz band, because Maynard Ferguson had a pretty hot band at the time, and my game was to try to fall into that slot somehow. I wasn't thinking right. I didn't really picture myself the way that I do now and did later. So I had a whole bunch of people, including John LaBarbera, who I haven't seen in years.
Right.
You know, write some charts, and I got one of Bill Berry's charts and a few things just gathered up to put together, and I wrote a couple of my own. So we went in and recorded that, and then started traveling around with the band. I lost a lot of money doing that, you know. And then we got into doing a second album. And that was, I think was Space Available. Is that the second one?
I think.
Manhattan Wildlife Refuge.
And then Tiger San Pedro.
Tiger San Pedro.
Right,
That's
right.
Yeah.
In fact, Tiger San Pedro was a John LaBarbera chart, I think, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he thought it was humorous because there are no tigers in San Pedro, you know. But we did that, and after it had gotten released, you know, I remember going to John's office, you know, and John would sit at his desk and he says, Bill, the album is not doing very well. You know, he'd give me all kinds of things to feel great about, you know. I'd come out of there wanting to die, you know. And while I was out on the road on another trip with the band, I got the message from him that Columbia Records had discovered Bruce Springsteen. They were canceling my contract with Columbia. I was really depressed when I heard that. That was the end of it, you know. So that's so much for Columbia Records.
That's unfortunate, and unfortunately, it's also not a unique story for jazz artists, even at your level and stature. Let me just ask you specifically about the 4-floor walk-up cadenza. Like, how was that something you just came up with on the fly? Had you got it worked out a little bit in advance?
I had written that tune, you know, and sat down. And in those days, my thought process was for some reason to have the damn cadenza in the middle of the tune instead of at the end where it belongs, which it should have been. And so what we did, D, 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 and I come in with a triple high E flat, you know, which I haven't played in years.
I have never played, but go ahead.
No, you know, coming down, I worked my way down and played all kinds of all through this thing. It was all this stuff. And I didn't really play any ideas. They were all just, you know, not to bring anybody down who's listening to this, but it was all just things that when I listen to them now, I go, well, yeah, technically, yeah, but musically, I'm not sure. But for the time, it was interesting because nobody else was doing that, you know. So what I did is simply turned it all loose. I just said, what the heck, I'm going to play as many notes as I possibly can, and it was in the middle of the tune. So when we did this live, Danny Stiles would play after I got through. After the cadenza, the place would be screaming with applause and stuff. And by the time Danny came in, the crowd was already burned out. So here's the cadenza already done. Instead of putting it at the end of the tune where it should have been, I, like a dummy, had it in the middle of the tune. I think about that every so often and go, oh, man.
I actually thought just kind of the opposite. I thought it was kind of cool because, like you're saying, it's typically it would be at the end, but and I mean the fact that you could play at that level, it commanded attention, you know, in the middle of the chart. I thought it was good.
Yeah. You know, like I say, I wasn't thinking in any direction but that at the time. You know, there are other tunes I did cadenzas on that are 100 times more interesting than that one. You know, that really worked out right. You know, but you know, I was a young guy, and then I was just, you know, wanting to show off all the speed I could come up with.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, like I said at the beginning, it had made such an impact on all of us. So we all appreciate the fact that you did it. In the 70s, you moved out here to Los Angeles. You were obviously doing extremely well in New York in the recording scene and as a solo artist. What made you make the move out here? And then now that you look back and you were such a dominant force in both places, how would you compare the two kind of musical centers?
Okay, let me start at the top of this thing. I had made a couple of trips to Los Angeles, you know, to play at Dante's. That was one of the big jazz clubs. And while I was there the first time, I met the girl that I'm married to now, Mary Ann. She was trying to help Carrie Leverett collect all of the, you know, there were 1,000 people in her, it seemed like. And she was helping him out, and I saw her. It was love on first sight. I just went, oh, God, okay, this is it. It was so much it that I had a friend in New York named George Trefan, who was a big womanizer, you know, like I was before I met her. And I sold him my black book for $150. I said, this is it, I'm done. I'm done, that's the end of all of this. I met the one, this is it, you know. So So I did Dante's, and then I went back to New York and all. And of course, while I was back there, I had informed my now ex-wife that I never wanted to be in the same room with her again, let alone be married to her. You know, that's another. So now I'm headed back to Los Angeles again to play Dante's again. Now I get in Dante's, you know, and I'm on I play a set, and I get in, I talk, ladies and gentlemen, I am so thrilled and impressed with Los Angeles. This is a place I would love to be. In fact, I am planning to pack up all of my stuff and move here and stay and live here personally. And the place was full of musicians. Not a sound did I hear, nothing. And I'm standing on the stand, and everybody, it's full of, and all of a sudden I hear from back of the, over on the bar, says, "Don't look now, but I think I just heard Dick Nash vomit into his soup." Which was just a joke, because Dick Nash is one of the greats of all time.
Yeah,
and he didn't have to worry about anybody coming anywhere or doing anything.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. But
That was Barney Liddell that said that. He was on the Lawrence Welk band.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Good trombone player, too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so once you got out to LA, and I know when we were driving over here this afternoon, you were saying how you miss New York quite a bit, and of course you're an East Coast guy to begin with. But how do you, when you look at it now, how would you compare the two places from the musical perspective?
It's different now. It was a whole different story. Back then, New York was the apple. Mm-hmm. That's where, you know, that to me, it was, for years and years, I really did well there. But at the time that I chose to come out here, there was another reason too. Pat Williams had called me and said, "I'm working like crazy out here. If you'd get out here," of course I had already decided to come, "I'll get you a lot of work." So at that time, the work was dying in New York. Mm-hmm. A lot of any movie calls were out somewhere else. Jingles was down the toilet. Mm-hmm. A lot of the recording studios had pretty much folded up, and anybody who was working at all did a Broadway show. Mm-hmm. And I thought at the time, you know, I would rather be boiled in oil and do a Broadway show and sit in a pit, because I'm slightly claustrophobic.
Okay.
That never worked for me, you know.
Yeah.
Ever since Frank Rehak went and barfed in my lap.
That'll cure you of
He,
interest in shows, right?
We were doing a ballet, a French ballet with Zizi Jeanmaire, and Frank is sitting there going all over the front of me. And in those days they had one suit, and that was it. And I had to sit there living with this for the rest of the show. It was just, I was bummed out. Yeah, I said, "Rehak, what's wrong? What'd you do that for?" He said, "Hey, don't you dig Boss Vom, man?" I said, "Oh, cancel."
For those of you, and I bet there are probably quite a few younger players who don't know who Frank Rehak is, he's a name worth looking up, and he did have unfortunate drug issues, and I'm sure that was probably at that time, but an amazing player. You worked with him a lot, so
great.
It was quite. I had the good fortune of when I was in high school playing in the Bay Bones with Billy Robinson up in San Francisco, and Billy would always have great people come in, yourself, of course. And Frank Rehak would host some rehearsals at Synanon, the drug rehab place. So I'd go up there. My mom probably put the fear of God in her. I'm driving by myself up to the Synanon to have rehearsals. But I was always amazed at Frank Rehak, what a great player he was.
Oh, he was wonderful. He actually straightened out. When he went to Synanon, he stayed there long enough to become the director of the whole thing.
Right.
He was in charge of the entire thing. I guess recently, in the last, I don't know how many years ago, they finally got in trouble and they're canceled. There is no Synanon anywhere now. So.
Interesting.
Frank called me 2 days before he died. And just said I'm going to be leaving soon,
Oh, he knew something was wrong.
Yeah, I won't be able to talk to you, and it's just been great playing with you, and God bless you, and all that,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's kind of beautiful in a certain kind. Imagine if you could say goodbye and thank you to people that are so meaningful to you.
Yeah, I think he did that all around. I think he covered everybody. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's great. Bill, in addition to the 2 records you did on Columbia, then you've gone on to record over 25 CDs as a solo artist. Do you have a couple of favorites that jump out at you, looking back on that body of work?
My all-time favorite was A Time for Love that I did with all of Johnny Mandel's tunes, and wonderful Sammy Nestico.
Yeah.
Oh, God, what a gift to humanity that guy is.
Yeah, yeah.
Greatest, you know. I did one before that called Bonafide,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which was pretty good too. Bonafide was a little more open and stretched out. Did a lot of long solos and a bunch of things on there, and I wrote a couple of things and whistled on one of the tunes. And
Right.
you know,
Yeah, I forgot about your whistling.
The best, one of the unforgettable on that Bonafide is one of the best things I've ever done in my entire life. That's worth listening to. Because I wrote French horn lines that I played behind that. It sounded like a mini French horn section, you know.
That's cool. Very cool. I always thought that Time for Love record was spectacular, and that tune, of course, Johnny Mandel, such a great composer and arranger and former trombone player. But that tune just seemed like it went perfectly with you. Like it was just a great match.
Yeah, it worked. That chart is just amazing that Sammy wrote. You know, he's one of the greats of all time, Sammy Nestico.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
God.
Well, that kind of leads us nicely into. I like to just throw out some names. I call it name association, and have you just give us a couple quick thoughts about some of these amazing players that you've worked with and are very good friends with over the years. And let me start with the late, great Carl Fontana.
Oh. Now, if you want to talk about the one that I consider the all-time greatest jazz trombone player that ever lived, it's him. Oh, Carl was. I did many gigs with him. We did a CD together that was available. It was done for the a Japanese label. I don't think you can get it now. But that turned out really well, you know. Carl was one of the most humorous individuals I have ever known. There's a joke he told me that I can't tell. I don't think I can, you know.
You could give it a shot.
Oh, I'll give it a shot, you know. We were on a plane, and we were going off to somewhere, and he was telling about this story about this accountant that got in serious trouble with his taxes, and he's sitting, you know, clicking and punching. He's looking. He says, I'm $75,000 in the hole. I don't know what to do. And his friend is with him, looking at him. Well, what are you going to do? And in those days, there was a wrestler known as the Pretzel, and if you beat him, you'd get $50,000. He said, I got to wrestle the Pretzel. And his friend says, you're crazy. He ties everybody in knots until they can't move. You don't have a chance. He said, I can't help it. I got to have money. I got to wrestle a Pretzel. And his friend said, man, you're crazy. So the day comes and he goes to the arena, he climbs, and here's the Pretzel standing, this huge, monstrous, gigantic individual. And he gets in, his friend says, I can't watch this, you know. So the crowd is cheering and all this stuff is going on. And finally, screaming, the crowd is just going crazy. He opens his eyes and the referee is holding his friend's hand up in the air. Now and the Pretzel is laying on the ground in a ball. Now they're on the way to the dressing room. His friend says, what did you do? That guy can kill anybody. What did you do? He said, well, he says, he grabbed me and he started tying me in all kinds of knots, my legs and back. He said, my head. He said, and I just couldn't look. He says, and everything was going on. I didn't know where to go. And finally I opened my eyes and I saw this big pair of balls staring me right in the face. So I bit him. And you know what? It's amazing the amount of energy a guy gets from biting himself in the balls.
I was wondering what direction that was going to go at the end.
You know now. That probably isn't going to make it to the. But that's a great story. He told me that story, and I giggled all the way to where we were going. I think we were going to New Orleans. To play there.
That's great. Well, continuing along with great trombone players, we're talking about him previously, and you did a lot of work with him in New York, the great Urbie Green.
Now, there is, as a trombone player goes, there, in my estimation, is the greatest individual that ever played the trombone, the greatest trombone player I ever heard. And I'll tell you when I first found him. When I was in the Navy, I was on a carrier Ranger, and we docked in Yokosuka, Japan. And I got off, and I went on Liberty. I guess it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm walking down the main street of this little Japanese town, and there's a bar. It had a musician's lyre on the front, and in Japanese. So I thought, wait, interesting. So I walked in, and there's 2 people in there. There's a bar guy and then a waitress. And I went and sat down, and this place had the first stereo I ever saw with 2 speakers over here. And she walks over and sees my uniform. She sees a musician's lyre and says, "Ah, you musician, what you play?" I says, "I play the trombone." "Ah, you play trombone. Ever hear of Urbie Green? He's smooth. We got leckered." And so 25 yen later, she goes and puts on Let's Face the Music and Dance.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I lost it.
Yeah.
I had never heard anything like it. And I'm sitting there listening to this magnificent trombone playing with a great band.
Yeah.
I could hear Al Cohn in the band. I knew he was there, because I'm listening to this and I'm going, holy mackerel, back to the drawing board, And I stayed there from mid-afternoon until midnight. Nobody else came in. And I had that whole record, those are those round things with a hole in the middle, played 26 times.
I can believe it. That's the impact Urbie had on.
And I couldn't believe. Finally, the shore patrol came and gathered me up and took me back to the carrier Ranger, and they carried me aboard, And I don't remember anything until the next morning when I woke up with the most absolutely unbelievable hangover any human being has ever had. I got up and went to the ship store and found Let's Face the Music and Dance with Japanese subtitles. I still have it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, continuing with another trombonist who played on your Manhattan Wildlife Refuge band. And it's sad that he is passed away now, and I always thought he was pretty underrated when you listen to how great he played, but the late, great Wayne Andre.
He was amazing. I was very close with Wayne. We used to get on the phone once or twice a week and just talk about stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wayne was a great curmudgeon. If there was anything, if they were doing a session and he knew that something on the contracting end of things wasn't going right, he would call it up.
Mm-hmm.
He would go for him, right away, And I thought he was an absolutely great trombone player and a sensational individual.
Yeah.
All around, yeah.
Yeah, he always, obviously I didn't have as much association as you did, but I know whenever I was on, I was the beneficiary of of him going to bat for the musicians. He was very much about doing the right thing.
Oh, yeah. He was on Winding's band. It was his chair that I took when I joined Kay's band.
Oh, okay.
Because Wayne had left it to be busy in New York, Of course, then I was out on the road with Kay,
Yeah. Oh, interesting. And one of my favorites, and I know you had a close association with him, unfortunately, very tragic ending, but Frank Rosolino.
Oh, Frankie, man. What a guy, I mean, let me tell you one thing I noticed always about Frank. Frank was fearless. There was nothing he wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
In life or any other way. He was just a wild guy. And when he played, one of the things I knew about Fontana, most of what he played was in the key of C, F, B flat, or E flat at the most. He never went beyond that. Rosolino would play things in the key of D, A, B, and it didn't care to him where he was. And he would play, I got a recording of him playing, I forget the name of the tune, but he plays approximately 26 choruses on this thing. And every one is crazy. I mean, he's just mad. He was a madman.
Yeah.
All over the place. You just would really just... have you got the CD where he plays on? A video that he's...
Oh, yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. But it always amazed me. I mean, my dad took me to hear him in the Bay Area when I was in high school. It amazed me the economy of movement he had for what he was playing. I mean, yourself as well, but it was everything was just right. He almost looked like he was a statue. I mean,
he used, Fontana and myself and others, just the first 4 positions. Everything else is, You don't have to go unless you play a low C or a B natural.
Right.
Or a low
right.
D flat or that. Everything is up here.
Yeah.
You know.
That's
I'll tell you a story about him. We were at Dick Gibson's jazz party
Sure.
in Colorado. And we had played a set in the afternoon, I guess it was about 3 o'clock, downstairs, the three of us, me and Carl and Frank. And now we went to Rosolino's room, and the three of us started playing a blues, one chorus at a time, around in a circle, and someone would play a bass line. And we went around, and we started at 4:15, and at 5 o'clock, we were still playing that blues. Now, boom, 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 boom on the door. And Rosolino goes over, opens the door, and this guy's standing. I'm from security. We've had a complaint about you playing in the room, and could you kindly cease and desist? And Rosolino goes, slam. He slams the door on him. And the guy didn't know what's hit him. We go back, we're playing again. He comes back again an hour later. Now it's almost 6 o'clock. And Rosolino does the same thing. And that's the last we saw of this guy. He said, I'm not going back to that room for love or money. I'm not ever going. Those guys are crazy.
That's a great story.
God, he was a marvelous guy.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing that story. That's a great one. Bill, as we kind of wind down a little bit, as you look back on your extraordinary career, is there anything you'd still like to do that you might have missed up to this point? Or
God, I think there's a lot of things that I'd like to do. You know, I would like to do a new CD pretty soon. You know, I've got things in collection to do. I've even got tunes picked out. I have just recently done one with Gary Irwin, who has a big band out here.
Okay.
And I've done some solo things with him and his band I've done 2 projects with him already. And we have just done another one.
Oh, nice.
In which I played a whole bunch of, one of the ones was Guess I'll Hang My Tears Out to Dry.
Oh, beautiful.
Which
yeah.
really came out good. I mean, I was listening to it the other night, I listened through it just to make sure that it's, you know, safe for release. You know.
I'm confident it is.
Oh, I think it is too. The Gentle Rain is on there too.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
other
beautiful.
things like that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that, boy. Well, that's great. I mean, I knew, even before I asked the question, I knew that you're still, forging ahead as a solo artist.
Like, years,
yeah, thank God. That's great. Bill, I usually ask our artists we're fortunate to talk to, for the young people that are viewing this, if, the music business has changed so much in your lifetime, and it's certainly going to change a lot going forward. If there was a young trombonist out there who was thinking about trying to make this his life's work, what bit of advice would you offer to them?
I tell them, don't quit your day job. I'll tell you I'm going to go back about 12 years, maybe 15 years. I'm jogging down in Riverside Park, down near me, and I see 2 young black dudes carrying a boombox about this big, and it's going boom, chick, boom, chick, boom, chick, boom, boom, chick. People, chick, people, who many people, chick, boom, boom, how the luck is, people, chick, people in the world, chick, boom, chick, chilling, and I went, oh, I think we're in deep trouble. And what has happened was rap has really taken over the music business, taken it over. It's a humongous financial success.
Yeah, no question about that. Yeah.
And that's really what's going on. So if you look over the whole scene, a lot of jazz artists are literally, like I say, taking day jobs, ducking out of the whole scene, unless they are really active within their business, what they do, like you are, for instance, staying on top of things and doing other things within the music business to keep active. That is the secret, is to keep active, to find things to do that are going to benefit you musically, emotionally, personally,
Yeah. Well, I think for you too, I mean, you look at your career and, certainly the times are different, but, you could have easily just been a side musician and
Yeah.
done all the studio work and the TV
Yeah.
jobs and everything, but you had the initiative to become a great solo artist. So
I
it's
had
the
to.
same idea, you know.
See, I fouled out with the biggest contractor here in Los Angeles, Sandy DeCrescent, big time. I cannot tell you what I said. I'll tell you after we get off of this thing.
Okay.
But it was not cool of me to do it, regardless of the fact that I had reason to do it, and the situation in which I did it sort of aimed me at that. But what I did was so uncool that I will never be forgiven for what I said. So anyway,
Well,
I had to get out and do other things and do studio work, because that was the end of my studio career right there.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but on the positive side of that, we all get to hear you play stuff we'd like to hear you play. So
Yeah,
that's an amazing thing. Bill, listen, thank you once again for taking time out today to come down, and mostly thanks for all the inspiration from all of us trombone players out there. You've given us a huge gift, and we really thank you for that. So
Bless you all. Thank you kindly.
hey,
Thanks for having me, too.
My pleasure, Bill. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time on Bone2Pick.